This here is Bowser Jr. Now, as you can see, Bowser Jr. is on Dragon Driftway. Not a particularly easy course, and he's in a pretty dangerous lobby. There's a lot of Yoshis, there's a lot of Donkey Kongs and Luigis that we're gonna have to watch out for. But the thing about Bowser Jr. here is that he doesn't really know the Mario Kart lingo. So as we race today, I'm gonna try and basically explain some of the lingo that Mario Kart players, particularly in the online competitive scene, use to communicate, because I think for beginners, I would still class myself as a relative beginner. I've been playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for years, but I'm still not that amazing at it, because a lot of my time was spent in LAN play or split screen with friends, and easily I could dominate there just from having experience. But in online, everything's different. You gotta know the tech, you gotta know the terms. So that's what I'm gonna do today. Now, the first terms I wanna discuss are the different types of tracks you can get. So the first type is a bagging track. Now, a bagging track is a track that will give advantages to players that will consistently slow down. Bagging is a pretty controversial term, I think, in the Mario Kart space. It's something I don't do that often. Basically, you hang back, you slow down to put yourself in lower positions so that you can get better items that would help you later on in the match, and so you can avoid things like that, where I've just been absolutely obliterated by the middle of the pack. Is the most dangerous place to be, really. And so that you can avoid things like lightning shocks and blue shells and bullet bills speeding past and superstars and random red shells like this poor guy's just been hit with, all that good stuff. So a bagging track, I'd have to think of some examples, but a bagging track is kind of a track where you're more so rewarded for doing that. I wouldn't even say rewarded, it's safer to do that, really. Watch out for the blue shell here. That was a pretty poor start, to be honest. So after thinking about it, I would say a couple good examples of bagging tracks where you're going to want to hold back and grab some items would be something like Dry Desert, where there's a lot of shortcuts and off-road areas where you can use mushrooms and golden mushrooms to catch up easily, or something like Wildwoods or Cheeseland, really. I would consider to be bagging tracks. But here we've got Wii Rainbow Road, which I would definitely not call a bagging track. In fact, this is the next type of track, which is a front-running track. Essentially, a front-running track is the track that gives an advantage to people who stay towards the front of the pack a lot. I think Wii Rainbow Road, is a good example of this, because you can see the roads are very narrow. So if you're going to be trying to race up the pack a lot, you're probably going to get hit a lot more. There's less space to kind of dodge attacks, like that red shell. Would not have been able to dodge that if I didn't have a banana. But Rainbow Road is definitely an example of a front-running track, and I think what would be some more examples of front-running tracks? Probably something like Excite Bike Arena. They say obviously the track changes every time you play it, but it remains very open. This blue shell is going to do me in. Careful not to fall off the track there. I don't expect to hit anyone with that green shell, although surprisingly, I think I did. I think the Yoshi up ahead does have an item, and that's fine. I need this red shell to defend myself anyway. Okay, guess I need to use my fireballs, and it didn't work. That's unfortunate. Okay, really? My lord, they have a lot of red shells. You see what I mean there? Like, even in front running, it's not easy. It's not easy. I would have needed a triple banana or some insanely good defense work to really defend myself from all that. But I think honestly that's just a situation where there's not much you can do. You just kind of gotta take what you can get and get back to the front of the pack. Oh, Sunshine Airport. Sunshine Airport I would definitely also consider to be a front-running track. In my experience at least, definitely when you're playing Sunshine Airport, I definitely do a lot better when I'm sticking towards the front for the majority. And it's definitely a track I know like the back of my hand, even in mirror mode, really. I played some mirror mode online the other day, and honestly, it was a lot of tracks that I didn't know that well in mirror, so I was getting my butt kicked. Okay, that was unnecessary. That blue shell had it out for me, and now I'm kind of falling to the back of the pack. I suppose my performance is not giving the greatest example of this being a front-running track, is it? But you still gotta have the skills to beat. And I'm not quite there yet. This bullet bill, knowing my luck today, is probably gonna hit me too. And here's another piece of advice: Mario Kart 8 Deluxe players, they always say, don't call things luck. Ultimately, everything does come down to a little bit of RNG in this game, but I think generally you can pull yourself out of bad situations. I just completely failed to. So I got 0 VR points. I didn't lose any there. I'm actually a little bit shocked by that. Yikes. Okay, I'm gonna say it. Sky High Sunday is my least favorite track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I really, really do not like how this track plays. I think, just look at it on the map. I think you can kind of tell this was either designed for World or for Tour, and neither of those I think works particularly well with 8. You see these railings in the middle? I feel like this would work so well in World because you can grind on them. But in 8 Deluxe, I really do not like how this track plays. I often don't enjoy my time on this track. This would definitely be another front-running track. You can see it's very high up. There's really no off-road. You just fall into the abyss. So if you're going to be bagging, you're probably going to have a bit of a rough time catching up. As we saw in Wii Rainbow Road, I think that was the perfect example of, if I had held on to my position better when I was in first, I could have easily won that. But because I fumbled and I lost the position, I really couldn't get it back that easily because, it's not a bagging track. But there are obviously more terms that I can't really give that many great examples of, especially in gameplay, especially on a track like this. So, you'll want to be aware of things like shroomless shortcuts, which I think are fairly self-explanatory, but I've definitely seen some confusion. Essentially, there are some areas in certain tracks where you can hit a nice shortcut without necessarily using a boost item like a super mushroom. I don't even know how I fell off the track there. You see what I mean? I do not like Sky High Sunday, and I don't have any boost items, so... And I lost my other red shell. So this session is just going really great, isn't it? Yeah, this is a track where you can't really get any boosts without anything, because again, there's no off-road. It generally is just bagging tracks that you'll more often find that kind of way of catching up. Where you'll find these shortcuts. Something like DS Mario Circuit in the Booster Course Pass, I think, is a fantastic example of a track with loads of shroomless shortcuts. If you're really precise and tight with your drifting, if you're really careful with your drifting, you know the drift of the cart and your character you're using, then you will absolutely be able to get by without using many items at all. I think another term a decent amount of people are familiar with would be trailing. Or when you get trailed, you say, oh, I was trailed by that guy. Essentially, you get too close to another player and they're holding an item, they're trailing an item behind them like a red shell or a banana, and you hit the banana, they don't even drop it. That's a very common thing to happen, especially in online races where everyone, in fact, it just happened at PT Piranha. He got trailed by my triple banana. In fact, he took 2 of them, which is a little bit greedy of him, but we'll let it slide since he got me into a better position, I guess. In fact, I would almost say it happened to that green shell there. If you wanted to argue that, you definitely could. But I think people are less familiar with the term of lag trailing, which is where you seemingly get hit out of absolutely nowhere. It can happen to your items too. I remember in a previous session I had recently, I threw a red shell and it just seemed to explode out of nothingness. And that's just because of the way that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's online works, is that essentially on your opponent's screen, they hit you, but on your screen, you didn't get hit, but it still registers the hit because they hit you, which is what happens when you just seemingly get hit out of nowhere. And it can happen in the reverse as well. You know, your opponent, they see that they hit you, but the server doesn't recognize that it hit you, and your game doesn't show, or your game might even show actually the I'm hitting you, but because the server didn't recognize it, or maybe because it didn't hit on their screen, you know, I've done a very poor job of explaining it, forgive me. But you won't get hit, and you won't take any damage. And this kind of thing happens in other games, you know, it's very common in games like Fortnite Battle Royale. You know, you use a sniper rifle and you shoot someone, and they don't seem to take any damage. Or you don't seem to take any damage when you see the bullet connect to your character, and that's just it's the exact same thing that happens with trailing in Mario Kart Deluxe here. It's happened a few times during this race. I haven't been lucky enough to have dodged like a red shell thanks to the netcode, but I have been unlucky enough to come in 9th place at the end of this race. Shout out to the poor Drybones all the way back there who just lost 10 VR points. This is really not my session, is it? Wow, I wonder which course might be chosen. I think Yoshi Circuit might be a little bit of a popular choice. But the way I see things is that I might not be doing too great in this session, but it's still a worthwhile session because I'm practicing and I'm explaining some of the lingo. Granted, I'm explaining it very poorly, but I'm still explaining it, and hopefully anyone listening is kind of picking up what I'm laying down. And I think that's the kind of, if you want to get into Mario Kart Deluxe Online, that is the kind of perspective you need to come into each race with. Even if you lose horribly, it's still worthwhile experience, and you know, you shouldn't feel too poorly about it. Now Yoshi Circuit, I would definitely say, is less of a bagging track than a lot of others, but I think you can definitely bag on this track and get away with it. So I think that's what I'm going to try and do here in this race. I think I'm going to try. I don't bag much. I don't know if I bagged in any of my previous videos yet. In fact, you can see these 3 guys are already doing it. But joke's on them, because I'm doing it better. There we go. There's 2 item boxes. I believe Nintendo did nerf bagging in the final booster course pass update. If you that shortcut there you can really only take with a mushroom, and that is the kind of thing that bagging tracks have. But Yoshi Circuit is it doesn't have much off-road that you can take. There is one particular section coming up on this section that is great for baggers, I would say. But for the most part, I would say it's not an insane track for bagging. You know, I had a couple mushrooms there, and it really only got me up to 7th from 11th. You know, in fact, that green shell actually helped out more, and I think that Shy Guy just got hit with a lag trail. If you saw that Black Shy Guy, he just kind of took damage out of nowhere. And that's the exact kind of thing I'm talking about here. I would have been able to take that shortcut, but can't really use the fireball in time. But if we hold this mid position, I can definitely be happy with that. Coming up on that bagging session again, but doesn't matter. I can't use it because I lost my mushroom because of the lightning bolt. The last couple of sessions I played, the lightning bolts have been absolutely ferocious. They've been everywhere. Every race I've been hit by a lightning bolt, which I guess leads on to the next technical term, which is a shock dodge. Essentially, I've done it a few times. Everyone really has if you're lucky. A shock dodge is where you successfully avoid the effects of a lightning bolt, and you keep your items and you don't, you know, get shrunk, which is a fantastic thing to happen, because frankly losing your items in the middle of a race is really annoying. Now this can happen because you're in a superstar, or you're in a bullet bill, or even if you just like fall off the track and Lakitu is still pulling you up when the shock hits, you will just dodge that. Boo, it's quite rude. I would have liked to have held on to that super one until the end, really. But honestly, if I can just hold off these guys, which I'm slightly worried that I'm not going to be able to do considering how fast they're gaining on me. Yeah, no. That was a little bit of a cheeky drop there, but at least thanks to that mushroom from the boo at the last second, I didn't come in 5th, which would have been substantially worse. I'm in a new lobby now, and it looks like we've got an 8,000 VR Japan player here, so they might destroy me on this baby cart. On this baby park course. Now, the last bit of lingo that really comes to mind for me right now is being backed. Now, in a similar vein to being trailed, basically being backed is when it's actually an intentional throw backwards. by your opponents. So they're holding a green shell behind them, and instead of you just driving into it, they actually intentionally throw it back into you. It's pretty common, you know, you got a back camera for a reason to line up your shots, and I know on my time I've definitely hit a few very cheeky. That is a perfect example of me getting hit by something that I just did not see. So if you want to see an example of getting lag trails, that is pretty much exactly what I was talking about there. But yeah, that's pretty much all the major lingo that comes to mind for me right now in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I'm sure there's more, you know, the more advanced players use. But I'm not one of those players. I don't pretend to be. But if I ever decide to do like a proper, you know, beginner's guide to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you know, I actually, you know, think about it, voice it over a bit, properly give advice, I'll definitely come back to the topic of lingo and try to give more concise explanations. Really, I just wanted an excuse to yap about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, that wasn't an intentional bag. I think in Baby Park you can kind of do a little bit of cheeky bagging if you're incredibly lucky. But really, that was just an underdog moment where I managed to end the race in second after a pretty rough majority of that race, actually. I didn't do insanely great there. We might be getting another Yoshi Circuit to end out. I want to vote for that. I want to see if we get... Oh, yeah. Yep. It's Yoshi Circuit, of course. I think the topic of bagging versus front running and if bagging is acceptable is very interesting, and it's definitely one I'd like to come back to once I'm a little bit more educated on the topic. But I think the simple rule is if you just want it, just for getting better, you know, ignoring is bagging lame or is bagging cool or not. I think the simple rule is that if a track has a lot of shortcuts, bagging is probably better. It's a more reliable strategy. But if the track doesn't have any shortcuts, it's maybe very windy. You know, something like Rainbow Road where you're easy to get a fall off, or Sky High Sunday, then you definitely want to try and be a front runner. Like right now, I'm definitely front running, but I have no idea if it's gonna hold up, considering all I've got for defense right now is a coin. If we just hold on to this, share by strat for making you get something that isn't a coin is having a coin when you hit the iron box. It'll give you something else, like a green shell. This Yoshi is definitely right on my tail, though. He's definitely... oh, snaking! Snaking, of course. How could I forget snaking? That is definitely a very... That's probably the most well-known bit of Mario Kart lingo just ever. Even more so than bagging. It was a very big thing in Mario Kart DS and I think Wii as well. Was snaking. Basically, you basically just do this. Kind of go back and forth with your drift. You can't do it as well in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. In fact, it just got me hit there. But it is something you can do to an extent. You just keep hitting these mini turbos to get yourself a little boost. Now, in Mario Kart DS, it was an insane strategy. It was like the thing that you know, good players did to make sure that they were always, you know, fast. Like I just did a lovely shock dodge. Lucky drive out of there. But snaking is definitely not so much of a thing in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. We're gonna have a little bit of a bag moment here. It'll be... Oh my. We are dodging things like crazy around here right now. I'm just trying to keep away from those guys because they're superstars. I'm gonna hit Luigi here actually. So I think if I'm lucky... Nah. I thought I had a shot there at first place, but we're coming in second, and that is a completely fine way to end out. So, thank you for tuning in. Have a good morning, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. 22 VR points. Not too shabby. That's a pretty rough